Okay, so I'm sitting here looking at Spinoza's How to Improve Your Mind, and it's really interesting to look at Spinoza in terms of his ability to achieve what could be called a denial of the separation of God and nature. Now, one way to think about that, I think, is to suggest that for Spinoza, God is wholly impersonal. This is an impersonal God. It's the order that is all around us and is us. We are part of that order. I think, in largely, he has a Stoic view. His view is very stoical minus his position on emotions. His position on emotions is very anti-stoical. He has a sort of, one more overpowering emotion to take over a different emotion. Again, the Stoics were critical of this, but he did largely adopt a Stoic orientation toward divine providence, or what could be called the fates, or the natural order of things as how they had to be in order to harmoniously emerge. And so I think what happened is in the Christian traditions, and it's funny that Spinoza at the time, his books were banned as heretical. He was excommunicated from the Jewish tradition. His practices there. He was also put on the books that were excommunicated by the Pope. He was called a heretic. Subsequently, now, he's definitely seen as someone who believes in what philosophically, arguably, is, quotes, a God. It's a wholly impersonal God. I think to many people who are Christian or of a kind of orientation that separates the creator from the created, they fear that if you have a wholly impersonal God, then there'll be lawlessness. There's no order. There's no reason for obedience. It's really odd to think about the notion of God that's expressed in those traditions as opposed to, I think, what Spinoza's trying to drive at, right? For Spinoza, you don't have to worry about people being lawless to an authority figure who's not. See, it's sort of like the Christian tradition came out of a kind of Gnosticist tradition where it separated the sort of divine spirit from this evil demiurge who rules this planet or this world, and this good-evil separation is so extreme, rather than seeing opposites as part of nature and as part of nature's complexity, all woven into nature's diversity. I think some of the traditions radically separated the human from nature. They suggested that humans are not from nature, they're not of nature, and in fact God is not of nature, separate from nature, wholly separate from the created, and is somehow other than that. And humans and God are both other than earth and material, and then the task is for humans to try to ride it out here with the evil demiurge and then hopefully escape into reunion with this divine substance. Wholly different than, again, Spinoza's orientation toward the divine order of nature and how we ourselves are part of that divine nature. We are part of the harmoniously self-aware cosmos. There wouldn't be lawlessness and chaos if people were to suddenly understand what Spinoza's talking about. I don't think people need an obedient other and to believe that they're other. The world is a hard and hostile place, but part of that hostility is perceived because of the sort of metaphysical worldview that people have about events and why they happen. I think one can accept that there is much hardship, much that will be difficult, but it doesn't mean that this, it doesn't mean that this isn't right in its own way. The task is to learn how to accept the gift, which was exercising your capacity to judge and to do what you can do, to really realize how much freedom you have and to focus your energy and your effort on everything that is under your control, and then to just not worry about anything that's not under your control and just accept that as the deal. Imagine that there was no creator, but in the created, in nature, how it devised itself, how it somehow came to be, it came to be in such a way that it had to allow for certain things to be and other things to not be. And one of the things it allowed to be was for some things to be under our power. It allowed other things to not be under our power, and those would include, hardships of natural catastrophes, death, aging. I think to see those as problems to be solved rather than, I guess, ways of understanding part of who we are and learning to see ourselves um, as having ultimate freedom, but not freedom over everything. Yeah, you have ultimate freedom over what you have freedom over, which is your ability to decide, your ability to choose, your ability to do things. And that was, I guess it's a kind of determinism for Spinoza, right? It's so interesting. I mean, he has a sort of materialist determinism. I think when people hear that, I wonder what they hear. I think one way to understand what Spinoza is getting at with this notion is to suggest that writing in the 1600s, he's competing with people who still believe in divine intervention, in some sort of holy other who comes in and does something like divine intervention. Spinoza's, he paved the way for early biblical criticism. He made it possible for people to really question whether or not reality isn't basically just physically connected. Of course, it's all materiality. Just because it's all materiality, though, doesn't mean that that materiality isn't complex enough to allow for various forms of human freedom. At any rate, thinking about Spinoza and telling people if you haven't read any, go check some out. Thanks.